Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Ivanti ELA webcast series. My name is John Bartz. I'm with Network Consulting Services. Welcome to Part 4, Identity Management. With me today is a special guest from Ivanti, Robbie Anderson, identity expert on the Fed team. Good morning, Robbie.
Hey, good morning, John.
We've been exploring and recording all the pillars in this ELA series over the past 4 weeks, and we'll be posting the videos on our YouTube channel. I will get a link into the chat box there shortly for you. We have one more to go. We've got UEM next week, next Thursday, and we're giving away an OGO backpack every webinar. So today, Robbie, you're going to choose the best question. First off, though, what is an ELA? Many of you know what it is, but it's basically a simple, high-value, user-based subscription that delivers the versatility to solve your greatest IT challenges. We know that Ivanti has been growing by leaps and bounds over the past couple of years with all these acquisitions. And this quote you see here, I've taken straight from Ivanti's brochures there as well, too. So there's some great benefits like the Avanti Cloud, extraction reporting, and true forward licensing, so you don't have to worry as you grow. And we can get into all of that when the time is right. But for today's presentation, we want to look at the identity pillar today. There's two options on the ELA. One is unified IT, where you get all 5 of these pillars, or the pick 2 option. So you can see at the bottom of the screen there a couple of different options suited to your needs. But today is all identity. So Robbie, let me hand this over to you. I'm going to make you the presenter. And away we go on identity.
Great. Okay, cool. So one thing I always like to start off with is Identity Director has had 4 different names over the course of its life. And I think mostly that's driven around marketing desires and needs to be into a certain space. But Identity Director as a whole is a service delivery and entitlement and rights definer and provider. So don't pigeonhole it as an identity component itself. And once we get into it, and I'll show you what that really means, but it's more of a framework and a platform that enables you to create automatic delivery of service and entitlements, as well as provision, users, as well as allow users to self-service requests, access and rights, and services as well. And it's not limited to the digital or virtual world. It easily crosses boundaries into the physical world. So like ordering new business cards, there could be a self-service panel on here where you could request that. And, if somebody in the mailroom needs more envelopes, we could do that as well. But today what we're really going to focus on is onboarding and offboarding, and the identity management and governance around provisioning access and rights to different resources based on that user's identity and their job role and their function. And I'll show you how we can pre-provision services and access that we know that user is going to need based on their job role and function, and then also have services and access requests available in a self-serve portal to them that they could request outside of what we know they automatically need. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to onboard a user here. And the onboarding process is fairly simple. What Identity Director does is it looks at a source of truth. Whatever source of truth you have in your environment for a user, persona, identity, what have you, we're going to be able to connect that and sync with it, and then just automatically start onboarding users and provisioning access and rights and entitlements and things. That source of truth can be a singular source of truth. It could be multiple sources of truth. So it could be an HR database, it could be a spreadsheet, it could be a text file, it could be a combination of all 3, and you can selectively pick and choose which data fields out of those 3 different sources you want to trigger off of to create that user's persona within your environment. So let's jump over here, and this is Orange HRM. This is just in our demo environment. It's just the open source HR database. HR databases are typically your primary source of truth because that's usually the entry point for a user's onboarding process. So the beautiful thing about this is that your business process and function doesn't have to change when you're onboarding a user via automation with Identity Director. HR goes about the same thing that they've always done. A new hire comes in, it's been approved, HR goes and creates all the appropriate entries for that record, and then from there, instead of them having to send paperwork or a ticket or something over to the help desk, Identity Director just watches and it sees a new entry added to the HR database, and it then kicks off all of the automation tasks associated with onboarding a user. And here we're going to assign a supervisor, and this could be handled in multiple different scenarios based on your business process. May or may not be needed, depends on your environment. But in this scenario, the supervisor is a direct approver for service requests that the user would make that require approval. So if they want to, map a color printer through automation, it would have to go through their approver, and their approver would get a request, and they would have to approve it or deny it. Kind of saves you from people printing off thousands of cat pictures on the color printer. And so this section is where we actually start defining who John is and what he does for our organization. So let's make John the CTO. Why not, right? And the reason this is important is because what we typically see is that you can predict about 85% of what resources, services, and applications a user needs based on their job role and function, location, title, all those different things. So, I mean, you can even get as granular down to like the floor of the building that they're on, and then maybe the directional location of the corner of the building they're on, and then you could pre-provision, maybe a printer mapping to them. They're on the 4th floor in, the northwest corner, let's give them the printer right there automatically. So they don't have to go and request it. They don't have to go and, call the help desk. Put you in Chicago. So that's all that's associated with onboarding a user. Those are the only fields here that we need to reference to kick off that task. So one I'm going to show you now is Avanti Automation. Avanti Automation is the actual service integration behind the scenes that actually does the heavy lifting and the mechanics of onboarding a user. That's the one that is going to connect into Active Directory, create a user object, connect into Exchange, create a mailbox, create them a home directory somewhere, map that accordingly. All of those different tasks associated with onboarding a user that are just repetitive and a drain on your IT staff, we can automate and connect into each one of those different systems as well as SaaS systems and provision all of those accounts and resources and access. I'm not sure what we're up to now. I think we're 350 plus out-of-the-box native automation connectors for all of the different systems that we can connect into. And that list is constantly growing. So we have an entire team dedicated to just building connectors, and the connectors typically get built based on a customer demand. So if you have a deep integration with some third-party platform and you're going back and forth with support about, constantly trying to script things into it, we can spin up our connector team, and they will actually go and research, locate the API, figure out how to build a connector for it, and then publish it to the community. So everybody benefits when someone wants a connector. It's not just limited to onboarding and offboarding again, and I'll get into that and show you all of the different features and functionality it has, but managing virtual machines is actually a fun one if that's applicable to anyone as well. So you can just assign virtual machines and access to them to some of your developers, what have you. They could spin up a virtual machine, and then they can fully manage that virtual machine by themselves through the self-service portal without actually having to call and engage, the virtual admins and waste their time to, reboot a VM.
So, Robbie, you mentioned, 300 different plugins or options that are already available, and then you also mentioned the fact that we've got engineers that will create new ones. Is there any charge for that?
Typically, no. If it's a very use case specific engagement, yes. So, if you wanted to do one particular thing and it's not readily available in, a published API and there's actually like engineering work on the back end for us, yes, there is. But if it's just the standard, API that the product manufacturer has published, then no, they usually just do it at no charge and then publish it to the community.
And we've got them pretty well covered with that many. How many again?
Over 300? I think we're right around 350 plus out of the box last time I checked. So like this is the list of all the connectors, and you can download them from the community site as well. But it's pretty extensive. Like if I expand all these, it'll scroll off the page pretty quickly. But
okay, there's a question about when HR enters a new employee. Is there an alert or a workflow when a person's been added or terminated? How does IT get that initial alert?
All of the above. So there's highly configurable workflows where you can trigger a set of automation tasks to start that process, and then you could also trigger some human intervention tasks as well and send emails to different groups of people. It actually, automation integrates with all of your standard service desk platforms as well. So on top of doing all the automation tasks behind the scene, it can also create tickets via automation, update the tickets and close the tickets, assign the tickets to different groups. So maybe we're going to go ahead and create their Active Directory account via automation and we don't need human interaction. But then maybe they do need a phone delivered to their new office, right? So then maybe we could go into our service desk, open up a ticket, assign it to the phone team. Hey, we have a new user. They're going to be in this location, on this floor, in this office. They need a phone. And then that person would get the ticket notification, go set up the phone.
Okay, and then another question about, will this interface with a mainframe system?
We have done mainframe interfaces many times, and that is definitely a services engagement just because of the unique and usually proprietary nature of the mainframes. But we've definitely done it, and it's very possible.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So we jump over here to and so this is our activity window in the automation portal. So right here is where the onboarding process started, and you can see that there's a lot of individual tasks associated with that onboarding process instead of just one onboarding task. The reason for that is when you create your automation tasks, you keep them generic to that one task that it's doing. You wouldn't want to create one task that does 20 things, because if there's a failure within that giant group of tasks, the whole job is going to fail. If one of the tasks fails, for whatever reason, maybe it's one of the systems it's connecting to, all of the rest of them will complete. Also, you can recycle and reuse all of the different tasks in different, what we call run books. And a run book would be a collection of tasks. So each one of these tasks associated with onboarding a user is in a run book called Onboarding. Create the account, create the mailbox, create the home drive, map a drive, put them in this Active Directory group, put them in that Active Directory group, create that SES account. Each one of those tasks you can use individually in different run books. So that's why they all break out. 4:10 is when it started. Let's see here. 4:11 is when it completed. So a minute and a half to fully onboard our user. And so John should now have access to our system. So this is the user-facing Identity Director web portal. We also have native iOS apps and Android apps. What's handy about the apps is the approval process as well for managers. So if some manager is on the other side of the planet at a conference and one of their subordinates requests access to a resource, they don't have to be on their email, logged in, VPN, whatever. They can just get a notification on their mobile device, hey, so-and-so wants to map this color printer. They can hit the approve button right there on the mobile app, and then it's delivered to the end user in a matter of seconds. So let's log in as John here. And you'll also notice up in the corner here, we have some branding. This is I think this is from a last demo I did with the state of Utah, but you can skin the entire interface any way you would like it, and the branding and skinning is all GUI based from the admin portal. We're not going to get into the admin portal today. That's more of an advanced user interaction demo, but it's literally drag and drop and pick the colors you want and move things around. There's no web developers and coding involved. So this is the landing page, and you can also configure the landing page to display whatever you'd like for your organization. You know, if you have some featured services, if you want to post some announcements about, you know, a particular system is going down for maintenance next Thursday or something, you could post that there. Users would get notified. Let's jump over to the services catalog. And this is where I was talking about it not being pigeonholed as an onboarding, offboarding identity management solution. It's more of an entitlement and service delivery framework platform. So you can really craft any service that you would like and make it available to your users based on their job role and function. So it's not an all-you-can-eat buffet. If you work in the mailroom, you're not going to see the service panels for creating Azure virtual machines. Since we onboarded John as the CTO, he of course has access to a lot more than, you know, the mailroom employee would have access to. And that access entitlement is very granular and dynamic. So you can set a condition where someone is qualified for a service. So let's say Azure virtual machines. If you're in the IT admins group, you qualify to request and use the Azure virtual machine service. You can also further set restrictions on that as well. So while you might be in the IT admins group, let's say you're just an admin assistant. They don't need access to create virtual machines. So while they're in that one group, you could set a restriction that if they're in this other group, they still don't get access to it. On top of that, you can further set dependencies as well. So maybe they qualify for it based on the group membership that they're in, but then you could set a dependency that says, hey, they have to have an Azure account linked to their user object. If they don't, then they're not going to see that service panel, because if they don't have an Azure account, it's not going to work. Why would they need it? So you can get pretty granular with what you have available to your end users in terms of access functionality there. The pre-provisioning that I discussed earlier briefly, the 85% of what we can predict that users need, that's just based on the job role and function. So we know that everyone is going to need Microsoft Office deployed to their machine. So we just automatically pre-provision that to them based on them being in a group that has a user account. Do they need Visio? We don't know. They may or may not need Visio. So we could put that as a self-service request option here in the user portal. So they can request Visio. Maybe that has to go through a manager approval process. Maybe it doesn't. The approval process also has dynamic rules associated with it as well. So you can have a hard-coded direct report manager that approves it, or you can also create smart rules. And a smart rule would be something along the lines of anybody that is a member of this Active Directory group can be an approver for anyone that is within this particular organizational structure. Now, if they're in the Chicago office, anybody that's in the Chicago admins approval group is an approver. So when someone requests something that requires approval, the approval request goes to 5 different people. The first one that approves it, it gets delivered to the end user, and then the approval request is removed from the portal of all the other ones that haven't even seen it yet. So
I like the request a candy delivery. Hopefully nobody has to approve that if I'm the CTO. So
yeah, so that was one of my sales guy and I built when we were going to a conference, and what I had was a backpack full of different candy, and he would be talking to someone and show them the mobile app on his phone and say, hey, you want some candy? And when would you like it delivered? And you can configure, these panels are all completely configurable, and so they'd say, I want it delivered now, and you would pick what kind of candy you wanted, and you would hit next, and then it would complete. I think I broke this one previously, but no. You would hit next, and then it would send me a notification on my mobile device that, hey, so-and-so sales guy is talking to a customer, and they want 2 Snickers bars now. I've reached in my backpack and go over there and deliver it to them, and that was kind of how we illustrated that you can very easily transition a service request in the digital world to a physical delivery without a lot of heavy lifting and interaction.
And it fits right in too, because we've been sending out some candy over the past 5 weeks to participants. So they've received $100,000 bars. There's one more coming. So and we didn't set this up either. So but there is a question here though on the Orange HR system. Going back a little bit, what function automatically synced the data from the Orange HR system into the Identity Director? Was it a scheduled run book, a task, or a SQL query?
Great question. So there's, in this particular demo environment and the way it's configured is we have an automation task that's just looking at the Orange HRM database for the user fields, and when we see a new row created, we trigger off the automation tasks for the onboarding. That could be very dependent on your particular environment and what we're looking at for your source of truth and what you want to trigger off of. Something else of importance are job role changes as well as offboarding. So maybe someone moves from legal to finance, right? That's not a new record. So in that instance, we would have an automation task that is watching for the field that designates their job role, their function, their department. And then as soon as it sees a change on any one particular field, then it can kick off a role change set of automation tasks. So it would automatically return all of the access and entitlements and resources that were provisioned to that user based on them being in accounting or whatever, and then start provisioning them access and entitlements to whatever department they move into, legal.
So question on the store here versus the catalog in Service Manager. Would you recommend putting the catalog of services in the Identity Director store or the Avanti Service Manager catalog?
Up to you. So they're portable. So we could, if you would prefer to go with this because of the mobile access and the entitlements and rights management, as well as the onboarding and offboarding, we can port all of the services from Service Manager over into Identity Director, and we can also port the Identity Director services over into Service Manager if you would prefer to stay with that. But I mean, that's really just kind of an organizational decision. There is no preference. They're both kind of interchangeable, and one's no better than the other.
And there's no duplication of efforts then. You can transition over to either one of them.
Correct. I want to touch on the offboarding real quick here. Offboarding is...
You're going to terminate me? Are you going to terminate me?
Oh, no, I'm not going to offboard you. You're in there now, so you're going to have access. You can request candy deliveries all day long.
There we go.
The offboarding is equally as important as onboarding. So let's say you have a bunch of SaaS applications that users get access to as part of your onboarding process, right? When they get offboarded, maybe someone misses one, right? Maybe they don't hit the save button, whatever. That user could potentially have random access to some SaaS account that has private corporate data in it for the end of time, unless someone audits it and checks it. With Identity Director, anything that is provisioned and assigned to a user within Identity Director is, of course, tracked throughout its entire lifecycle, and when they get offboarded, it goes and uses an automation task to hence return that service and disable that account. So there is no, somebody's on vacation, they're not going to get to that for another week. If you offboard someone, they get offboarded immediately based on how you build your workflows for offboarding. And you can also build different workflows for offboarding based on whatever parameters you would like to key off of. So maybe somebody that's an intern, you're not really worried about archiving their data, so you just go ahead and delete their mailbox and delete their Active Directory account and delete their home drive. But executives and legal staff, you're going to want to archive those for maybe even different periods of time as well. So maybe executives get archived indefinitely, legal gets archived for 10 years. It's up to you, completely configurable. And again, those offboard workflows would trigger based off of that user's job role or function, or whatever other parameter from any sources of truth that you would like to key off of to trigger those different offboarding workflows. This was a fun one here that we did for State of Utah. They have a lot of temporary workers that will come to, one of their offices from a different office, as well as, contract employees from different agencies. They got somebody from the Department of Justice coming to work at, one of their courts for a month, what have you. So we built this service that allows them to request temporary hardware. So maybe they want, a MacBook Pro. Maybe they want specific applications that are required by their job role and function installed on that device before it gets delivered to them. So they could select yes here, and I'll show you why that's important in a second here on the next page. And here we can choose the term of engagement. And what this does is this automatically schedules an offboarding workflow for 5 days. So at the end of that 5 days, no one even has to manually go and say, hey, let's offboard this user. They're just automatically offboarded at the end of 5 days. You can stuff an approval in that process as well. You could stuff tiers of approval, a quorum of approvals. So they all automatically get offboard, and Skynet isn't out there, starting World War III with their laptop. Some manager has to sign off on it first. And then they can choose where they get to pick that device up. So let's do Salt Lake, sure, why not? Oh, let's do Moab. There's a funny story behind that. So you can see the MacBook Pro has an approval built into it as well, right? If I go to the next panel, it gives me a list of the specific non-standard software applications that I want to install on my device because I selected yes on the previous panel right here. And this list can be dynamic. It's all, again, completely configurable, whatever you'd like. But let's say that I don't need any, right? Let's just go no. If we go next, that list isn't even presented to you. So you can create conditional panels based on user input, and the depth and tree of the workflow can be as complex or as simple as you'd like. So here they're stepping into temporary office space options as well. So again, this is where the conditional pages come into play. So if I select no, it just moves to the end of the workflow and so on and so forth. If I select yes and say, let's go, we're going to go to Moab, again, more conditional pages. And it's a 7x7 cube. Wait, no, I want the mobile office in a Humvee. That was literally one of the options that they asked for. It was awesome. And so then the next page, you get another conditional panel that says, hey, somebody's definitely going to have to sign off on this 5 times before they hand you a Humvee to work in. But again, that's just some of the advanced functionality and services that you could provide to your end users via a self-service request portal as well. So you get onboarding, offboarding, you get automated service delivery, entitlement access, different resource access, role changes, offboarding, self-service delivery, all completely configurable.
So a question on that device as we're handing out those devices. You know, with Ivanti and this ELA, you know, we may have asset management or service manager. We may be inventorying those devices. So how does the system identify that device that we've just handed that user when onboarding or transferred? And how does that work within the other pillars?
Excellent question. So the Ivanti Unified IT story, everything is connected. So that list of available hardware can actually be dynamically pulled from Asset Manager based off of a pool of devices that you have flagged as temporary hardware devices. So if you're out of Service Book Pros, it wouldn't even be available as an option in that list. And when a user requests it, the help desk staff that is going to grab that laptop out of inventory and deliver it to the user would, you know, respond to the request in Service Manager, hey, I pulled the laptop that Identity Director dynamically grabbed from the list of available devices. It's been completed, it's been delivered for the user, and then it would get flagged in Service Manager as checked out, what have you, and then no longer available for Identity Director to use that one as an option on the back end. Does that make sense?
Yep. And then there's another question here about reporting on a specific employee. Would you be able to see what they have access to in all the systems at any time?
All right. These are great questions. John told me not to go here, but I'm going to go here and show it to you just because
We've got a good group here. Many of them have come to all of these. So we've been having good questions for the past 4 weeks.
So he told me not to jump into the admin portal, but I'm going to do it anyway since you asked. So this is the Identity Director admin portal. And if we look up a particular user, this is his Identity Director persona. And it shows you some, you know, attributes and identifiers here. We can look at his organizational tagging and see where he's configured. And the organizational structure can be directly linked to your sources of truth. So some of these could be Active Directory groups. Some of these could be unique identifiers in your HR database. And the aggregate of all of these is how you assign entitlements and access to services and resources. If we jump to the diagnostics for John here, we can see all of the services that he is qualified for. So a qualified service is one that you're qualified for based on your job role and function. And some of them can be hidden. They might not actually be even, you know, real services. It depends on what you're doing on the back end with automation. So he's qualified for all these services. This little button means that he does not have that service assigned to him, whereas, like, you know, delete Azure Virtual Machine, he doesn't have that. Email account, there is no option for it, so he's got that assigned to him. And what we can do with that is then look at the delivered services. The delivered services, these are all going to be the pre-provisioned services that were automatically delivered to him. Since he hasn't logged in and actually requested anything via self-service, it's all going to be the pre-provisioning, which is essentially his onboarding and then concur. On top of that, we can actually go and look at the transactions, which is likely going to be just his onboarding process. But if he had gone in here and requested a printer mapping at some point in time and then, 2 months down the road, requested that Visio installed, it would log all of that right here, show you when it was done, who approved it in the process. The system is the one that actually delivered it because it was done via an automation task. If it was a candy delivery, it would have shown the person that accepted the candidate delivery on their identity director portal when the request came to them as who it was delivered by. And actions is, when they requested something. So maybe it never transacted, but something still happened, and maybe an admin went in and updated their employee ID number. Maybe they went in and reset their security questions. Those show up here under actions. Again, John's kind of a blank slate. Just like we looked at John, let's go look at a service as well. I'm not going to dive too deep into this admin portal here thing. But we can also do the exact same diagnostic process with a service request as well. So you can pull up a user, look at everything that's ever transacted against them, look at what's provisioned to them, what they're qualified for, what they have access to, what they have delivered to them, what they've ever done. We do the same thing with a specific service, so we can see who is qualified to request the temporary hardware, right? Everyone based on qualifications. You can see the subscribed people, no one subscribed to it. This would be people that have actually requested it and had delivered to them. Those are subscribers to that service, right? So if this was Google Chrome and 20 people had Google Chrome installed, there would be the list of 20 people here. The transactions are every request that someone has done for it. So you can see that Dan Davis has requested temporary hardware, and Sam Merkel is the approver. So it shows you the delivery and then the return as well, because the return is equally as important as the delivery. And related services would be, a dependency that was set in the qualification for this service delivery. We don't have any set. The audit is going to be the log for actions done against the configuration of this particular service. If somebody goes and changes qualification criteria, adds another step into the delivery workflow, it's going to show up here in the audit log. There's also versioning. So if someone makes a change and it breaks something, you can roll back. You can roll back as many versions as you'd like. You can also roll forward and create test versions of what have you. So create a new test version, roll it out, mess with it, and then roll back to the production version until someone else approves it, what have you. So a lot of functionality there as well.
Robbie, we have a question on software licenses. When an employee moves into a new position with a new device, and say the previous device had Visio on it, but in the new position they don't need it, is there a workflow that would send the notification for the uninstall? And would we be able to track those licenses?
Absolutely. So the licenses would be tracked logically, not necessarily managed. So, our ILO, since this is an ELA call, you're going to have access to ILO, our license optimization tool. That actually tracks, the details of each license as well. But within Identity Director, it will track the deployments of different software applications. So you can say, so Google Chrome, we can set a maximum number of service deliveries. So if we only have 20 licenses of Google Chrome, we could set the maximum to 20. And then once the 20th instance of it is actually deployed, it will no longer be available in the service portal until someone either is offboarded and then it is returned back into Identity Director, or in the event of a job role change where they no longer require Visio, Google Chrome, what have you, it is also returned back into the system, and then that license count is available again. But again, this number is manually configurable. It's not linking to any kind of license database and managing that. So you're kind of on your own to police yourself there, what have you.
Okay, and then a question about you get both access and identity licenses types that allow Identity Director to do both automation and self-service functionalities, or do you? It appears in the licensing advertising if you don't get an enterprise license, you're only able to do one or the other. Is that correct?
Right. So there's there's two license types. So there's identity and then there's access. One only does automated pre-provisioning, so onboarding, offboarding, pre-provisioning known access software entitlements to that user based on their job role and function, and there's no self-service in it. The other license is self-service and no automated provisioning and onboarding, offboarding. So
and with the ELA, do you get both?
Yes. Since we're in the admin portal here, this is the last thing I'll show you in it, but this is just the overall transaction log for everything that actually runs through the system overall. So instead of looking at a particular user and see what's transacted against them, or a service and what's transacted against that, you can look at the entire platform and see what's happening there as well. And of course, you can filter it easily based on different successes or failures. But that's about it for the show and tell for Identity Director for onboarding, offboarding, and self-service and entitlements.
Just one quick reminder about interchange is coming pretty quickly. If you need or would like a coupon code, $100 off, go ahead and email me. John Bart's there. My email address is there at the bottom. If you have any questions about today's presentation on Identity Manager or any of the others, feel free to shoot me an email or a phone call as well, and I'll make sure that the proper person gets back with you on that. Robbie, thanks for your time today. We certainly do appreciate it. But we've got one more webinar next Thursday. You can go to our website, ncsi.us, and sign up for UEM, and that will close out the 5 pillars of the Avanti ELA. Robbie, thanks for joining us today. And on everybody, all the guests here, thank you for joining us as well. And we'll see you next Thursday at the same time for UEM. Thanks and have a great day.